When you think of iconic 80s British bass tones, two words come to mind. Tracy Elliot. From Peter Hook's haunting Joy Division chorus lines to Giggsy's Oasis Wall of Sound and Mark King from Level 42's Slap and Pop, Tracy Elliot is that sound from the 80s and 90s British pop. But how do you get one of those unmistakable Tracy Elliot tones without having one of those classic green lit rigs? So I'm going to show you how to recreate the Peter Hook Joy Division sound using my Line 6 Helix. Let's check it out. If you're looking for clean power and a mid-scooped hi-fi punch, then the Tracy Elliot sound is what you're looking for. But they're rare, they're expensive, they're really heavy, and we don't have one in our Line 6 Helix library. So how can we capture that Tracy Elliot character? It's clean headroom, it's bright top end, and that iconic pre-shape EQ using what's already inside the Helix. Well, that's exactly what we're going to have a look at in this video. The Tracy Elliot amp was born in Essex in the UK in 1979, and it was created out of a simple need for bass players who wanted their own amps with real power. They didn't want to share guitar amps like the Fender Bassman with guitarists. So like Ampeg in the US, Tracy Elliot was defining high power amps for bassists. And like the US brothers, the Tracy Elliot was offering more clarity, more control, and much more volume than was previously available to them in other amps. They introduced the GP11 preamp with an 11-band EQ, hence the 11, and a biamping capability. So much like the Gallien-Kruger, it could split the frequency across two power amp stages. Had a massive MOSFET power or transistor power stage. And over time they released a range of heads and combos of varying power and functionality, from the number of EQ bands to including compression in some of the later models. By the mid-80s, everyone from Mark King of Level 42 to Andy Rourke of the Smiths to John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin all had a Tracy Elliot green glowing amp on this stage. But the real Tracy Elliot signature came from the pre-shape EQ, or Type 1 EQ, which was a smiley curve that boosted the lows around 50 Hertz and crisp highs around 4 kilohertz, and then scooped out the mids at around 400 Hertz. It makes the bass hi-fi, bright, and cutting, a tone that defined both punk and pop and some Brit rock for decades. The Tracy Elliot business was sold to Gibson in 1998, and production then ceased of those amps in 2002. But the brand was then revived later by Peavey in 2005. In recent years, they've gone back into market under Peavey ownership with modern products like the tiny ELF micro amp and the massive 1200 watt TE1200 head, all carrying that legacy Tracy Elliot sound forward. So how do we emulate that GP11 Tracy Elliot sound in the Helix? Let's look at the amps first. So the Tracy Elliot used both clean solid state heads in their SMX series, and they also had warm tube heads in their V-type tube heads. So in the Helix, depending on which flavor of Tracie Elliot you're trying to get, you can either use something like the Gallien-Kruger, the G Cougar 800, or for that valve overdrive sound in the later models, you can look at using something like the Orange or the Mandarin 200 amp. To get that classic smiley face EQ, then you're looking to cut the mids at 400 Hertz by about 6 to 9 dB. And then you want to boost between 50 and 80 Hertz, and then boost again the 2 to 4K Hertz. So you're going to get that smiley face type of EQ graph. And that smiley face is what's referred to as the Tracie Pre-Shape 1. And that's what we're going to look at when we look at the Joy Division Peter Hook style sound. Now, because we're looking for a more hi-fi clean sound than a dirty grunge sound, we're going to be looking for a more high fidelity cabinet. So the 4x10 Eden, or in the Helix, that's the 4x10 Garden cabinet, which has a horn, allows that hi-fi brightness compared to the Ampeg SVT 4x10, which is a little bit more mid and bottom end. So this will give you a nice bright sound. You can always add a 1x15, maybe the Ampeg 1x15, to give a bit more bottom end if you want to make a fuller sound. But to get that classic sound, a 4x10 Eden matched with the Gallien-Kruger with that smiley faced EQ is really that Joy Division Mark King Level 42 sound that we're going to be pushing for. So let's have a look at the HX Edit and see if we can shape that sound. So we're setting up effectively level 42 Joy Division sort of high fidelity Brit pop sound. To get that Tracie Elliot clean tone, we're going to use a solid state amp. And so we've picked the Gallien-Kruger 800 or the G Cougar 800. And I'll come back to its configuration in a minute. But the cab we're looking at is we want a nice hi-fi sound and a tight cabinet sound. So we're going to use the 4x10 Garden of Eden or the 4x10 Garden. And I'm putting a 421 Dynamics mic on it. That gives me a bit more broad range, a bit more thicker sound. If you want a brighter tone, then I'd put a 57 on it. But the 421 gives that a bit more of an all-round bass tone. I've positioned it right next to the grill, and I've put it at the cap edge. So to me, that gives me the best overall tone from that. Now, if you want it to be a bit more bassy, then you'd move it slightly out, or a bit brighter, put it closer to the cone. But this, to me, gives my ears the best balance for that. I'm putting a cut at 45 Hertz, and I'm putting a high cut at 5 kilohertz. 5 kilohertz is roughly where most of the amp or the bass cabinets have a frequency roll-off. So cutting out there seems to be about right. And 45 Hertz means that I'm rolling off anything that's going to mix with the drummer and get rid of some of that mud at the bottom end. Makes the cabinet a lot more tight sounding. So I'll go back to the amp. I've got a bit of drive on here, but mainly just get some volume. Remember, this is a solid state preamp, so it's not going to overdrive, it's going to clip in the real world. So I'm just getting enough volume out of that to give me a good signal. And you can see here, I'm trying to get that smiley face. I'll put the bass just under midway and the treble the same, and I've dropped the mids down. So it's a little bit of a smiley curve. The master I've pushed up to 10 because I want to get as much headroom out of the amp as I can. And then I've adjusted the volume of the block on the preset with the channel volume. Now on the Gallien-Kruger, we have this contour switch, and it's designed to cut frequencies or dial down the 500 Hertz range. So by plugging that in, it's a bit like that EQ curve that the Tracie Elliot will give me. So I'm dropping out around 500 Hertz. The Tracie Elliot's sweet spot is 400 Hertz, but that gives me close enough within range. I'm putting a compressor at the beginning. Again, this compressor evens out my playing and tightens up a bit of the signal that's going into the amp. So if I look at the amp and the cab by itself with no other EQ, so I'm using a pick because that gives me a bit brighter sound. And I'm going to get a sound something like this. So bright sound, and that's that tone. But I can dial that in a bit better with a 5-band EQ. So again, with the EQ, what I'm going to do is I'm going to boost at around 80 Hertz. I'm going to cut around 400 Hertz, and I'm going to boost again at about 4 kilohertz. So anything above 4 kilohertz, again, is just going to start to become string noise. So I don't want to boost that too much, but up to 4 kilohertz. And again, I've only got 3 bands, but you can see I've got that smiley face going on again. So this will give me a bit of a fatter sound. You know, that's very clean, very tight. Now, if I really want to go into that sort of Joy Division sound, Peter Hook often used a chorus pedal. So I've put a chorus pedal in here. Now, there are a range of chorus pedals that you can choose from within the Line 6. I like this Ampeg liquefier, and if you check the video out above, you can see where I've gone through and talked about chorus pedals in more general, but this is the one that I like, and I've put it at about 30%. So I am just getting a hint of that chorus coming through. Now, if you want to make that into a bit more rock, then you can also then go and add an overdrive pedal to that, or you can change that amp out to be a valve version. And you can try using the Mandarin or the Orange amp, give that a bit more grit. Because the GP11 had an 11-band EQ, really a 5-band EQ is not going to cut it. Although that sounds good to me. So what I've done is I've now added a 10-band EQ. And now you can see that smiley curve a little bit more detailed because I've got more frequencies to play with. So from 30 Hertz, I'm pushing up. So I'm pushing that bottom end up, and then I'm cutting it around 500 Hertz, and then coming back up again in the higher registry. So if I now try that one, and then with the chorus, now to me, the 5-band was pretty close, but that 10-band's giving me the ability to dial in more accurately or get more control, which was the advantage of having the Tracy Elliot. That 11-band EQ gave the bass player a lot more control over that tonal sculpting. Let me know in the comments below which one you preferred or which way you went. So there you go. That's how we can capture that Joy Division Level 42 British pop Tracy Elliot legacy sound with the Align 6 Helix, either the Stomp or the LT. So remember the formula. We're looking at clean power with a mid scoop or a gentle push if you want to make it a bit more rock, and a bright top end with tight cabinets. You don't need the green lights on the stage to get that green sound. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and also check out this video next if you want to get more information on how to tune or dial in the Galleon Kruger on your Helix. Catch ya.